Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the first event in the Holloway series. And Jess, you've announced that you're going to record this, right? Just now. Okay, I suppose so. Thank you for welcome to this first event in the series. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Cecil Giscombe, and I'm the curator of the Fall Holloway on Zoom series. My co-curator and the Zoom runner is Jessica Lazar. Tonight, the faculty poets, Berkeley faculty poets, are going to read from our recent work. This fall, we're also hosting visiting writers to the program. Lyrae Van Cleef-Stefanen will be reading on the 23rd of September. Vivian Victor will be reading on the 7th of October, and Cecily Nicholson will be reading on the 21st of October. Cecily Nicholson will also be delivering the Mixed Blood talk on the 20th of October on the afternoon before her reading. The Mixed Blood series is partnered with the Holloway series. It sponsors talks by poets that center in the of poetic innovation and the languages of race. Cecily Nicholson's talk is titled Real, Located, and Restorative Poetics, Once a Black Rurality. The Spring Holloway series is curated by Jeffrey G. O'Brien. The spring readers will be Asaya Wadud, Emily Skillings, Benjamin Kruslings, and Joss Charles. You can watch for the wall posters about that. Tonight, the faculty is going to read. We're going to go in alphabetical order by last name, and I'll say a couple of words about each of us by way of introduction. Eric Falsey is a professor in the English department. His first book, Late Along the Edgelands, was published by Toowoomba Press in 2019. I'm Cecil Giscombe. I'm also a professor in the English department. My two forthcoming books are the much delayed New and Selected volumes, similarly now due out next year, and my collaboration with the book artist Judith Margolis, Train Music, which is at the printers as we speak. I was wondering what that noise was. It's an ice cream truck going by outside. I'm sorry. Jeffrey G. O'Brien is the author of 5 collections of poetry, most recently Experience in Groups. John Shoptaw is the author of On the Outside Looking Out, John Ashbery's poetry, and a poetry book called Times Beach, which won the Notre Dame Review Book Prize and the Northern California Book Award in Poetry. And John will be reading this evening from a recently completed collection, Near Earth Object. And Karen Solie will read last. She's this year's Holloway Lecturer in Poetry and Poetics. She'll be in residence at Berkeley during the spring semester. She's the author of the collections of 5 collections of poetry, the most recent of which is the Kaipley Caves, which was shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize and the Derek Walcott Prize. She lives in Canada and is in Newfoundland as we speak right now. And for an artist in mid-career. Her work has been translated into French, German, Korean, Dutch, and Hebrew. And we're going to start with Eric Falsey. Please welcome to Eric Falsey. Eric.
Thank you, Cecil. Thank you to Jeffrey and John and Cecil for inviting me. And also welcome, Karen. We're looking forward to having you visit in the spring. My internet's been a bit strange today for some reason, so please just let me know if I'm freezing and I'll turn off my video. Okay, hearing no of that, I will just read one poem. Today it's called Gnomon for the Simple Present. A gnomon, like the piece of a sundial that catches the shadow so as to tell the time. It's often, you'll see it as kind of a metallic wedge or blade, but it also has obviously a meaning in geometry and so on. Okay, Gnomon of the Simple Present. Sung, a sparrow flew high the branch, as trace elements capitulated to the fire break and the small river of atmosphere that cut along the hills where the day began with a bent display of icons to itself and its iniquitous predecessors, then sat quiet among the rotating set of crows above. Absent reverie, absent your own true feelings about the past, why would you disbelieve the echoes laid along the scape? It almost never begins as a single instance of fervor from which might be drawn an entire course of events, but rather as the tracery of any collection of sparrow paths that might constitute an atmosphere. Not an atmosphere, but a weather. Each time it's calibrated to catch any strand by which circumstances might call attention to themselves, even as the startled context lurched from cut to cut. It was as much a matter of naming the straggle as thumbing the fines. This, but not this. Never except in a torrent, only in cases to be sent on down the street. Just the once, and then disperse your notes about the creek. Not a gathering or a coda, but an offset arrangement wheeled along by happenstance and brought to bear upon the range of materials that held us in our hands these many times so as to set themselves within each claim. What would it be like to reset that which has been assembled already as a way to limn our urgency and beckon, however recessively, toward an alternate series of work products to display at the exhibition? There'd have to be the same habits, the same flight plans, the same stand of aspens along a ridge, equivalent supply chains, a mock-up of plinths and huts and water features that could suffer its curtailment as simply as any other, so that turning into the carefully construed paths, but from the other way around, offered those ahead of you the self-same view, but those behind a glimpse of headlights bucking their courses and narrowing in on the sheer turn of the gradient shift that kept the bankside on its toes, the hawks eyeing each refraction. Beyond the zone where the amphitheater gave on to the backstaging that gave on to the lake, you had your fill. The debt service arm of the venture was humming along. All our excess capacity could be turned over twice for every time we needed access to the report. But wasn't this precisely what one had been told to avoid? Disclosing the understory scope of operations while ignoring the signal changes sent to the chairs of every session couldn't but end up with a line of people in awe of each other, but tuned right up to themselves. Most often it was a matter of departure or of staging the present so that it happened differently, but still near enough that someone on either side might verify the report of the event's history and our bearing as written. Almost no one wants to jump the gap, but each is keen to take any hint that the pivotal scene awaits only their step. If it did all happen differently, then the unaccountable decrease in summer ice could serve as mere pretext for adventure at every calving. What had been saved of the sessions kept the present going for as long as it might, or for just long enough to catch the end as it spread to whatever virtues we first thought the floor plan possessed, but which were shown to be flaws in the revise. Of course, there couldn't be a load-bearing department next to the seasonal display. None of the team could get behind what they had stood up earlier. No one from the planning group launched by the first task force thought to come back around and reckon with the changes. It was, luckily for them, everybody's fault, or could be said to be so. Whatever might have been concocted from the early figures would be marked and warehoused. The key stakeholders would have to be looped in by the end of the week if the gains might be realized before the dust storm's next horizon. At this point, it was just spiteful not to apprise the wrens of the change or to keep the crows from opining. Weren't we obliged to inform each part of the field? Even though we failed at every previous effort to mark a bit of progress toward disaster, the final unfolding of cadences shouldn't need to founder simply because there was an oversight at the base of the stack that required all of our loved ones to unbuild their commitments and make new claims on an old footing. But the nests and roots are what they have been the entire time. And even though there was nothing to keep the neighbors from screaming at each other the whole way down the street, the nub of it would appear all at once on nearly every platform, just after the assembly of crows and wrens backstopping the site abandoned the scene and tuned themselves to another conversation about water sources and contingent weather while preparing a slate of responses to the latest allegations. We'd only just heard. There was hardly anything to be done. It would have been worse had I intervened. The whole schedule of indicators told of ruin, but those preparing their gestures amid the constant holding messages were not to be whatever the array of counters and glimpses and safety catches and flares, and no matter the costs that had been pegged, so easily gainsaid. Whatever knack those several ensuing sentences had for mustering despair among their cohort, and no matter the recapitulating metrics by which the past had been framed and turned as the various actors geared up for the most intricate and far-reaching show of themselves during the intermittent season. Telling the story of that series of weathers would likely help us wrangle a draft of workable sanctions out of the sparrows, who couldn't help but pity the crows, who themselves knew to keep well clear of the dogs fuck off screaming from 3 streets away, and who understand better than most what that last directive most likely entailed. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric, very much. I'm the next reader, alphabetically. I'll read a group of short poems from a sequence that is itself from an almost done, mercifully almost done book called book in progress called Negro Mountain. Negro Mountain is a real mountain in Pennsylvania, and its summit is the highest point in the state. It's a book of sequences, the second one. This is from the second one, which is the last one to be finished. And it's called The Negro Mountains. And it's addressed to the ancestors and to the descendants. The references, however, are mostly to Pennsylvania mountain ranges. The first poem, The Endless Mountains. The Endless Mountains could as well be the Werewolf Mountains. Count some days. The mountains just repel the story with their endlessness. A dusky fellow could give them enough to not be bothered by them for more. Come nighttime, please. The evening wolf is the necessary wolf. From now on, don't bother me about it. Poem called 7 Mountains. And she said, it's in God's hands now. Evils limitless and multiple locations serve. Make a rural cure, doctor. Make a favorable poultice. Mountains itch all over, all the way down. The mountaintops are bare rock and wave-like patterns. There's often as not a fat saddle between the ridges. Who do you think you saw? Second sight, second thought. Apostrophe is wide, uncountable. Mountains, the default. In real life, it's a tough neighborhood, doctor. Haunted, in fact. Nothing's enough. Count off. Poem called The Allegheny Plateau. Travel is enigmatic, and we don't have to go to Negro Mountain to see that. Doom being in the details is all there is to know. Sometimes music creeps forward and slows down to nothing like an animal could. The trace is fact, but content, the dull feeling, is elsewhere. Form is noise in the bushes. No bottom to the songs, which must be their charm. Such is apparent, obvious. The mountains are ridge on a plateau. Voices are that noise getting ahead of itself. It had seemed that certainties grounded in repetition, one thing on top of another. The mountains available, anglicize that. What do you travel to think about anything? Bear went over the mountain. I said this before. Let's be clear, I said then. Let's be clear, love, there's no frame in here. There's nothing but weather on rock. Carol me. Speaker's the werewolf of Negro Mountain, wouldn't you say, Doctor? Carol me that. What do you think they saw? Mount Davis. Mount Davis is the recently named top of Negro Mountain. It's the summit. It's a pile of rocks on top of Negro Mountain. Mount Davis. Don't mistake the speaker, best beloved, for the green man. Multiple addresses do abound. So also don't allow the mountain to fool you, child. In the forest to the south, it's the jaguar, the personage, the downturned mouth of the jaguar, articulating. Here, in these woods, it's all different. There exist hereabouts 1,000 ways to be a gentleman, even to all you meet. Now, to cough from here on, that would be the first. That is, the cough articulates the hesitation. Cough clears the air. A line of crows. Mountain's got a little bughouse sitting up top. Thoughts nothing catch in the throat. Shaggy Papa, Papa Bois, the dusky fellow at roadside. What do you do, sir, after such exhaustion, after the cloth's touched flesh, as it were, after it's out of you in all this range and space, the scandalous present? Made a mistake? Certainty's all out of you, sir. Articulate hesitation rules the roost. Make another, sir. A gentleman's cough in the theater is just the one thing. Crows do skirt the mountain, best beloved. The final poem in the series, the Negro Mountain series, is not addressed to Pennsylvania. It's a poem saluting my grandfather, William Ernest Smith, born in Mississippi in 1895. He left Mississippi as a young man and moved to St. Louis, where the racial climate was simply and obviously better. He died in 1980 before I'd thought to ask him to talk in any detail about his life in Mississippi. And the title is from a Census Bureau document. Event place, Beat 5, Camden, Madison, Mississippi, United States, 1900 census. Willie Smith, B, that's for black, at 5. Time of day would be the factor, but most days, wolves would have come along the creeks and rivers and through the canebrakes as well, and the cypress swamps. Safe to say, Doctor. They would have been red wolves, those wolves. Canis rufus, Doc. Almost bright-colored in their descriptions. And Mississippi Negroes, because of working outside then, would have crossed the paths of such wolves at work or, almost certainly, while hunting. Another fair speculation, eh? And the meat getting even closer to the bone. Persona yourself, my faithful MD. Occupational chattering aside, color intended, commerce in souls and spirit to be avoided, but you still being the gentle priest, ancestry.com, good brother, and no endless plateau. Lo, land in its place coming to mind as pure speculation, formless. But do no harm, Mr. Obia, foist nothing. And the swamps here, in this location, repel the story, and terms besiege us. Got that one right, Root Man. Not a mountain in sight, umber, curse-colored, or crowed, to offer opinions about any kind of wolf thereupon. Disfigure me, think it over, bring a shape like it was medicine. Interested speakers came through the scene. Old Natchez Trace being just over there, we didn't have to go to Negro Mountain. Crow, baby. The educated speaker might ask, what's the alliance between red wolves and the Negro character? Pine forests. Insolent question. Impatiently, have you guessed it or not? From just what is the voice speaking? Absence in the swamp, brother. Negroes in the wildwood. Close as we're going to get. no moon. Extirpated now. Am I right, Doc? That's it. Thank you. And the next reader is Jeffrey G. O'Brien. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Cecil. And thank you to you and Jess for organizing. And hello to all your names and chosen photographs and the lives behind them. And especially to Karen So Lee, who we hope will be entirely with us in the spring. And Karen will also be reading independent of the Holloway series, but sort of semi under its auspices, as the Holloway poet is, date to be determined. Like Cecil, I've been writing short poems, brief poems, I should say, with short lines. What can be said before self-interruption? I'm just going to read 4 or 5 of those. Of course, short for me. Anyway, the first is called That. The health of the cedar is its lack of opinion, green divided exactly into this time by fans of needles loading branches against the proximate air. From that to this, going on being, a flight into illness, we've ruined space in making it potential, especially at twilight with the men at the door. Long, short, long. Sunlight is to skin, as work to happiness. The breeze, unsure in certain trees, approaches speech much the way the sea discloses it has no place to call its own, none it couldn't go, asking havoc for advice. So we are left with only something like a string, that urgent, narrow piece of cloth designed to bridge the recurring shame of unfilled space. This is my problem with figures, their little reign on situation, the brief, local, bright authority of traffic cones, roadside flares, what all lights remind us of, the durably immaterial parts, wishing they weren't part of this utter maintenance, which my child, his head traversed by reds and golds, comedy and tragedy, will want to leave for the shorthand, outside knowing, while time attacks the idea of never, with endless lengths of docilely changing afternoon light, waving through an open west-facing window, 4 p.m. of a Saturday, August something, in the first year of. Art rack. They dropped it while running away. I barely noticed. I'd picked it up, nor that I've been trying absently to return it since, not because it's theirs, but because this is, I hesitate to say, the best and only way to meet people in the ruin field. Continuo. So, I had each day to draw from the hum of foreground and back at least one pseudonym, not yet quite under any obligation to assist in these, what were they called, developments. Beginning, in other words, to concede the way pink clouds stop fielding the ambitions dawn imposed on them. I was lucky enough to rent an impossible, uninhabitable box that, even unopened, allowed me to pursue the faintest consolation, sunlight coming from a closet, thin glow at the edges of its door, laughter of the child downstairs or outside, coming home as one so desperately frequently is wont to do. As for your question, no, it's still a dream from here, lying across what Earth sends up every other hour, from coverts undetectable to the clothed eye. Yet somehow here, like the magic in habit, or affections renewed, deep in the baseline, that gets so much closer to what it refuses to name, the more it avoids any explicit mention. I mean a sound full of knowing in advance the everydayification of life, its emotional work clothes, a jet-lagged labor stumbling from the gate with gifts and theft of the real, its brothers playing at being that, and having gotten to their apt destination, the royal stillness of these misplaced things sets up steady evidence of former motion. They got here somehow through a parable tension in the air. Then one note, more a complaint from a string, backed suddenly by others, all of them, that theft is the companion to joy, and anything that should but doesn't arrive, the bulk of a ruin, plowing through dusk as if in downiness, that end of day when pink is understood, both to be and to have come back, like laughing at ambition, an uncontrolled burn, gardens that specialize in the half-lives of assurances, and the dust that passes for benign or tinted air, but is much less pattern than mask. Dawn too. They aren't so far from each other. Harmony's impossible. In the long view, they appear even to meet in a coloration, those parts of the spectrum that can temporarily enrage with order, then submit peacefully to it. As for your other question, it's mostly sirens that form the accompaniment. What the is. Thank you.
Thank you for the sirens. John Shoptop.
Thank you, Cecil, and thank you, Jess, and welcome everybody. This first poem adapts a line and borrows a form from John Donne. It's called Song for the Far Side. No more than moon, the sun's mirror, not ours, however much we liken you to us, yet you were gouged from here. In your chasm, the lunatic Pacific swells for you, seashell. You keep your lava-laked best face toward ours. Is it to hide your pockmarks and your scars? We've now photographed your nameless backside. I know it's porn. Lyricists seem drawn to your second quarter, with your head full of foam, and your star-coddled crescent. I'm taken with all your phases. I dream lately of you on the wane, too faint in the daylight to draw much remark, though pitched among clouds like Hawkesye's bark. Have you no room, wished on diminuendo, buoyant arc? As you can see, the heat's bounding in our pressure-cooked dome. Rain burst upon us like a carpet bomb. We're sinking like forests with their species. Won't you uproot, transplant a few? But I'm rhapsodizing. Can we squint past Chevron, BHP, Aramco, Gazprom, clear to the sun, which recharges you on your night flight west? Animal spirits. My cellular electrolyte voltage gates swung wide at the red squirrel pup who caught my eye as she twitched in wait on the deer fence over the tabby gate, for her brother to appear and to commence their matutinal game of chase and seize. Then, after a moment, she disappeared, reappeared on the oak trunk toward the creek, with nobody on her tail, till with the back flip, giving nobody the slip, skittering off and skittering back, she reappeared on the deer fence over the tabby gate. Her brother never plays this way, as though the object of the game was to play the game. I wonder if she misses her sister. I remember when their mother led the three of them down into the sly world beyond the oak nest, and some time later, near the tabby gate, when I came across a squirrel's unflinching tail and was overwhelmed by an image of the missing sister full of play, seized by a red-tailed hawk who played for keeps. The tabbies were long gone by then. Old Max, our last, one day just stopped eating. Whether he or something in him knew it was time, I wish I knew. One afternoon, I snapped an everyday picture of him on his blue garden chair, looking down and to one side, preoccupied with his life. The picture now curls on our refrigerator door with a number of bleached family photos. One day he was outside, sitting right before me. The next, he'd somehow passed through the picture, from behind which he now looks out, like a poet from a poem left behind. The word gate does too much justice to the rectangular gap we'd snipped into the wire mesh of the deer fence, too small for a coyote, we hoped, though not for a possum, or for me. I could probably work my leg through, maybe even my head, though I might not be limber enough anymore to pull it back out. But for those who believe their spirit lives outside of time, twitching in weight inside their body, for those who aim to repair their aging malfunction by elongating their fraying chromosomes with an enzyme, or for the nanobot futurist by the Golden Gate who hopes to save his personality traits to an ivory mainframe, thereby giving death the slip. For all those, the gate to the kingdom of earth is overgrown, even though they love their morning walk, or run in the park, or on their grounds. After a cricket, hope holds despair as much as despair holds hope. Despair has to keep hope somewhere out of mind, like that fine-toothed strumming I heard over lunch from what couldn't have been a cricket. It was too cold in the fall, too sunny in the day. It must have been my tinnitus. Hope, hard hope, doesn't tune out, but listens through despair, its harsh reasons, for sounds of life. For the foreseeable century, the climate will gleam on us with a gleam that hardens, fissuring anywhere at once, as any expression will if it's held too long. Over lunch the next day, I heard the same sound, so I went outdoors and followed the strumming to what, sure enough, was a cricket, running one forewing down the other, somewhere in the noonday shade of the braiding wisteria vine in pod. I felt his strumming deepened the shade he basked in, but I knew he wasn't playing for me or only to please himself. Hope against hope and despair against despair are much of a muchness. Unutterable despair is real and widespread. A field mouse flown to a date palm, shrieking with eager owlets, is calm. But telling yourself the truth is, all earth is lost, isn't much harder than saying, earth will all turn out for the best. I'm counting now on a poetry not of absolutes, but of degrees. Despair is transmissible, so is hope. Getting around clean for the sake of rain, cooking and eating for forest is catching. A stand of broad coast live oaks will thrum acorns for 6 miles around overnight, more than enough for jays to bury away from squirrels and from themselves, and for hatching the oak stand's pot. The next day, nothing. So I went out and I listened to a silence in the shape of a strum. The strummer, I like to think, hadn't given out, but met up with an admirer. His hope would have held. He played like it would never have occurred to him to stop before he was done. And this last is in celebration of the analog clock. Timepiece. Time is best kept in a pocket analogy. The sun rounds the earth smoothly, without talks or ticks, as a clock's hands its button knows. 2 hands, not 3, since you can't tell time to the second before it's not. We live in an elastic present, no fine line between the past and future, where we'll stop 6 feet under, no digital click, but a terrain, a steep night, a tangled week, an August that shelves down toward a swift dream. And while I'm at it, muses 9, help me to love our mundane days, not try to solve by engraving, braving, or evading our local geocentric, diversely divisible 12. Tolls the cock. Hens chime, clock. At 6 hours after midnight, 6 till noon o'clock. Thank you so much, and please welcome Karen Solee.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to be included in this extraordinary group of poets today and to speak with you all. I'm just so excited about the upcoming term. I'll just read 3 poems from the Capely Caves, which is set on the coast of Fife in Scotland. And the poems I'm going to read are all sort of located on the coastal path alongside which the caves are still there. So in order to get to a stretch of the coastal path, which I walked countless hours during my stretches in Scotland, I had to walk through a caravan park, the Selkirk Links Caravan Park. And the first poem I'll read is, I guess it came out of a conversation that I overheard while passing through the caravan park. So it is imaginatively titled Selkirk Links Caravan Park. Gulls up at dawn with swords and shields. If dawn only in low season, in the week we can afford. My love, who negotiated with a silk cut in his wheel hand the unfamiliar roundabout to the A915 at Kirkcaldy, sweeps droppings from the paved deck like an owner with his whole heart. He grew old not thinking about himself. So it follows our vacation home is not ours, but let by the company on certain conditions for certain uses pertaining to a quiet enjoyment of sea views beyond the lower lots. Signed for with the understanding our initiative shall likewise be applied at the company's discretion. The dogs we don't have must be leashed, our wireless fee charged daily. Here is the rent, reminding tenants they don't own. Interest confirming for the borrower to whom the principal belongs. Here is the insurance to tell us we're not safe. And here is the loophole which allows it to not pay. the week he's scraped together is now his. My old man, who raises his spirit like a lamp, collects Stella cans tossed from the raceway down the hill overwritten with gorse and cow parsley, and who, discovering the bulb beside the door burnt out, will, cursing happily, replace it with the spare I laughed at him for stowing in the glove box. And this next is called A Plenitude. Appearing as though they originate in spiritual rather than material seed. As proof, we don't know how to properly celebrate or mourn. Bindweed and oxeye daisy, cranesbill, harebell, hare's foot clover, whose ideology is fragrant and sticky. The underside of reflection blooming across centuries. Arguments for and against belief, volunteering in equal profusion. My many regrets have become the great passion of my life. One may also grow fond of what there isn't much of. Grass of Parnassus. And when you finally find it, it's just okay. But look for lies and you will see them everywhere. Like the melancholy thistle, erect, spineless herb of the sunflower family. That the eradication of desire promotes peace and lengthens life is time-honored counsel. Still, you can't simply wait until you feel like it. The beauty of the campions, bladder and sea, the tough little sea rocket, is their effort in spite of, I want to say, everything. Though they know nothing of what we mean when we say everything, it is a sentiment referring only to itself. Purple toad flax, common mouse ear, orchids, trefoils, buttercup, self-heal, the Adoxa moschitellina it's too late in the year for. I can hardly stand to look at them. And all identified after the fact. But for the banks of wild roses, the poppies you loved, parked like an ambulance by the barley field. And the third is the final poem in the book. And it's called Clarity. In the center of the path, near the ruined bothy, styrofoam maybe, a sweater, fishing gear. As I approached, I saw it was a gannet. How odd. How long, then, before I realized it was dead? When did my sixth receiver register the hydrostatic pressure of fluid newly at rest between subject and object? Bill beneath its wing, the head's saffron seemed a signal that should fade in death. What killed it had not been vain in its signature, allowing for the vulnerable feet to be tucked, as is the instinct, under the quilt of its body. Cormorants presided the way they do over the sea's many funerals. Rock spoke through its forms the eulogy. The smaller is not the lesser stone. The day's warm air had cold ribbon through it, like a hotel atrium built around a stream, or the childhood swimming hole fed by an artesian current I visualized as darker than the surrounding water and more coherent, its integrity having not yet degraded. Much of what I feared then has happened, though not always as I'd feared, and so much more to fear than I'd imagined. On an afternoon beneath the queering, we watched the gannets dive, looked from the cliff edge straight through the clear water to the origins of variety. Thanks so much, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Karen. Thank all the readers. Thank you, especially Jess, for for being the Zoom runner. Jess, watch for the wall posters. Watch for the announcements, and we'll Lyra Van Clef Stefanen will be reading on I believe the 23rd of September. It's coming up very quickly. There'll be announcements. Thank you all for coming to this event this evening. I wish it was in person. I wish we could mingle, but for now, and right here, good night. Karen, pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to hear you. Welcome.